In the world of finance, you don't need to shout to hold power. You just need to know what the most arrogant person in the room hasn't figured out yet. I'm Claire Donovan, former head of product strategy at Grid Technologies. Headquartered in Austin, Texas. On my 38th birthday, I was fired by a dangerously confident new CEO in front of the entire office. He laughed. The room laughed with him. But 5 days later, when I walked into the investors' meeting as the new CEO of the entire company, no one dared to breathe. Let me take you back to where it all began. 8 years ago, I joined Grid Technologies as a senior product manager. The company was building cutting-edge cloud infrastructure solutions that were revolutionizing how businesses manage their digital assets. We weren't the biggest player in the market, but our technology was innovative enough to carve out a respectable niche. My background was unusual for tech. I'd spent my 20s in management consulting before earning my MBA from Northwestern. While my peers chased positions at Google and Amazon, I was drawn to Grid's potential. The company had brilliant engineers but lacked strategic direction. Within 2 years, I was heading the product strategy division, reporting directly to our founder and CEO, Marcus Teller. Marcus was brilliant but aging. A computer scientist who'd built Grid from his garage in 2008, he understood the technology landscape was changing faster than he could adapt. Claire, he once told me during a late strategy session, companies are like sharks. Stop swimming, and you die. He trusted me to keep us swimming in the right direction. What nobody at Grid knew, not even Marcus, was that I had been systematically acquiring company shares through an anonymous investment fund called Archer Valley Capital. The fund was my creation, established with the inheritance my father, a university professor, had left me after his sudden passing from a heart attack. Dad had always taught me that true power comes from ownership. Working for someone else means building their dream, not yours. He'd say during our Sunday morning breakfasts, when Grid's stock hit rock bottom during the 2021 financial crisis, I saw my opportunity. I worked with my attorney, Marcia Beckett, to create a complex ownership structure through Archer Valley Capital. Every bonus, every spare dollar went into buying shares. By early 2024, I owned 51.3% of the company, making me the controlling shareholder without anyone's knowledge. Why keep it secret? I wanted to continue working in the trenches, steering product development without the distraction of being the owner. I believed then, as I do now, that the best leaders understand their business from the ground up. Besides, there was something delicious about being underestimated. Everything changed when Marcus announced his retirement in January 2024. The board, unaware of my controlling interest since I never exercised my voting rights, hired Ryan Halden as our new CEO. Ryan was 36, 2 years younger than me, with slicked back hair and custom suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He'd come from finance, having made his name at a hedge fund specializing in tech acquisitions. His resume boasted of transformational leadership and strategic overhauls, corporate speak for slash and burn management. I remember the first all-hands meeting after his arrival. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Ryan took the stage, wireless microphone in hand, pacing like a motivational speaker. Grid needs to shed its skin, he announced, blue eyes scanning the crowd. We've been playing it safe for too long. The market doesn't reward safe. I sat in the front row, notebook open, face carefully neutral. But inside, alarms were blaring. I'd spent years building our product ecosystem to prioritize stability and client trust. Ryan's vision sounded suspiciously like dismantling that foundation. Some of you, he continued, pointing vaguely at the crowd, are committed to the old way of doing things. That's natural. But that commitment becomes innovation obstruction when it prevents necessary change. His gaze lingered on me for a second too long. Message received. Over the next 3 months, my influence began to erode systematically. My name disappeared from meeting invites. Projects I'd championed were placed under review. Budgets froze. Team members were reassigned without consultation. I documented everything, keeping detailed notes of each violation of company process, each data manipulation, each misrepresentation. I wasn't just being paranoid. Ryan was methodically dismantling the safeguards I'd put in place to ensure product quality and customer satisfaction. The final straw came when Ryan presented my $12 million enterprise security initiative to investors as his own brainchild. I'd spent 18 months developing that project, securing partnerships with 3 major cybersecurity firms. During the presentation, he didn't mention my name once. I could have revealed myself then, exercised my majority shareholder rights, and ended his tenure immediately. But strategic patience had gotten me this far. I wanted to understand his endgame before making my move. Then came my birthday, April 15th, 2024. I'd never made a big deal about birthdays at work, but my team knew. There was a small gift bag on my desk that morning, a handmade card and artisanal chocolates from Teresa and UX Design. At 10:30 a.m., I received a calendar invite from Ryan's assistant for a meeting at 11:00. Subject line, strategic discussion. Also invited, Heather from HR. I knew what was coming. Ryan's office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. He sat behind a massive glass desk, Heather perched uncomfortably beside him. Claire, he began, not offering me a seat. I'll keep this brief. As part of our organizational restructuring, we're eliminating the product strategy division. Your position is being terminated, effective immediately. I stood perfectly still, briefcase in hand. I see. The severance details are in this packet, Heather said, extending a folder. 2 months' salary, plus benefits continuation through June. Ryan leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. I know today is your birthday, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. Still a special day, right? That's when he laughed, not loudly, just a soft chuckle that conveyed his complete dismissal of me as a threat. Heather, desperate to please her new boss, laughed too, though her eyes showed discomfort. I'll need a copy of all termination documents sent to my attorney, Marcia Beckett, I said, voice steady as I took the folder. And I'll need 30 minutes to collect my personal items. Ryan waved dismissively. Security will escort you. Standard protocol. I nodded once and turned to leave. Claire, he called after me. No need to say goodbye to your team. I'll handle the communication. The security guard, Miguel, was apologetic as he followed me to my office. This isn't right, Ms. Donovan, he whispered. Everyone knows what you've done for this company. I smiled at him as I packed my photos and plants into a cardboard box. Everything happens for a reason. Miguel, remember that? As the elevator doors closed on my career at Stratus Grid, or so Ryan thought, I finally allowed myself a smile. Phase 1, complete. I called Marcia from the parking garage. It's time, I said simply. The next 5 days were a whirlwind of legal preparations. Marcia activated my shareholder portal through Archer Valley Capital, giving me access to all upcoming investor communications. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Ryan had scheduled a major investor presentation for Monday, 5 days after my termination. The agenda included a comprehensive restructuring strategy that would effectively gut our core product lines and pivot the company toward acquisition. He was preparing to sell Stratus Grid piece by piece. Marcia and I prepared a comprehensive counter dossier, complete with evidence of ethical violations, data manipulation, and abuse of authority. We also developed a revitalization strategy that would preserve our core business while expanding into adjacent markets. Monday morning, I dressed with purpose, a charcoal Armani suit, emerald silk blouse, and the pearl earrings my father had given me when I earned my MBA. For board meetings, he'd said presciently, when you need to look like you own the room. I arrived at the Westlake Conference Center 10 minutes before the scheduled start. Through the glass doors, I could see Ryan arranging presentation materials, charming investors with practiced ease. 7 men and 2 women, our key backers, were settling in with coffee and pastries. Taking a deep breath, I entered. The conversation halted mid-sentence. Ryan froze, color draining from his face. Ms. Donovan, stammered Walter Reed, our longest-standing investor. This is unexpected. Claire was just leaving. Ryan recovered quickly. This is a closed meeting for current leadership and investors. I smiled, placing my briefcase on the table. Actually, I'm exactly where I should be. I turned to the group. I'm here representing Archer Valley Capital, the controlling shareholder of StratusGrid Technologies. Confusion rippled through the room. Ryan laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. Archer Valley is an investment fund, not a person. A fund I created and control, I replied, opening my briefcase, through which I personally hold 51.3% of StratusGrid's outstanding shares. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, Ryan whispered. I slid a document across the table to Walter. Verification of ownership, certified by Ernst & Young last week. Walter adjusted his glasses, reviewing the papers. His eyebrows rose steadily as he read. This appears to be in order, he finally said. Ryan's face flushed deep red. Why are you only revealing this now? Because now is when it matters, I replied, turning to the investors. Mr. Halden has prepared a restructuring plan that will effectively dismantle 8 years of product development and customer relationships. Before he presents, I'd like to offer an alternative perspective as both the former head of product strategy and the company's majority shareholder. What followed was the most important presentation of my life. For 45 minutes, I walked through the true state of StratusGrid's business, our strong customer retention metrics, our technology advantages, our position for organic growth. I contrasted this with Ryan's misleading reports, highlighting discrepancies and manipulations. I revealed how he'd systematically pushed out experienced department heads, manipulated performance data, and promoted underqualified friends to key positions. I showed email evidence of his plan to sell off our patents to competitors, patents I'd helped develop. With each slide, the investor's expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to outright alarm. Ryan attempted to interrupt several times, but Walter silenced him with a raised hand. Let her finish. When I concluded, Walter removed his glasses slowly. These are serious allegations, supported by compelling evidence. I move that we suspend all restructuring activities pending a full investigation. The vote was unanimous. Ryan sat shell-shocked, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. One more thing, I added. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning to review Mr. Halden's position as CEO. 4 days later, after a thorough investigation confirmed my allegations, Ryan was officially terminated without compensation. The board unanimously appointed me as interim CEO, with full authority to rebuild what Ryan had begun to dismantle. My first act as CEO was to reinstate the department heads Ryan had dismissed. My second was to establish an advisory council composed of our longest-serving team members. My third was to create an anonymous feedback portal for all employees. I wanted to hear the unfiltered truth about our strengths and weaknesses. The transition wasn't seamless. Some damage couldn't be undone immediately. Several key employees had already accepted positions elsewhere. Major clients needed reassurance. But within weeks, the company began to stabilize. Former employees started inquiring about returning. Customer retention metrics improved. 3 months into my tenure as CEO, I called an all-hands meeting. Standing on the same stage where Ryan had once announced his intent to shed our skin, I shared my vision for StratusGrid's future, one built on transparency, collaboration, and empowerment. Leadership isn't about control, I told the assembled team. It's about creating conditions where innovation can flourish. Later that afternoon, I found myself back in my old office, now the CEO's office, staring at the Austin skyline. On my desk sat a small gift bag, a new tradition started by Teresa in UX. Inside was a handmade card signed by dozens of employees, thanking me for saving the company. I thought about Ryan, who believed he could control an entire company with a few PowerPoint slides and strategic intimidation. I thought about my father, who taught me that true power comes from ownership, not just of assets, but of your vision and values. In the finance world, you don't need to shout to hold power. You just need to understand what matters most and be willing to fight for it when it counts. As I placed the card on my bulletin board, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcia. Drinks tonight to celebrate 3 months of CEO Donovan? I smiled and replied, absolutely. First round's on me. The sun was setting over Austin, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Stratus Grid, my company, was just beginning its new chapter. And this time, I was writing the story. The first 6 months as CEO passed in a blur of strategy sessions, client meetings, and team rebuilds. While I'd known Stratus Grid intimately from my years as head of product strategy, seeing the company through a CEO's lens revealed challenges I hadn't fully appreciated before. Our cash reserves were lower than Ryan's reports had indicated. He'd used creative accounting to mask financial vulnerabilities. 2 major enterprise clients were considering non-renewal of their contracts. And our engineering team had fallen behind on our next-generation cloud security platform, largely due to the leadership vacuum Ryan had created by firing the VP of Engineering, Thomas Chen. I'd always respected Thomas and considered him a mentor during my early years at Stratus Grid. Bringing him back became a top priority. I personally flew to Seattle, where he'd relocated after his termination, to make him an offer. We met at a small cafe overlooking Puget Sound. Thomas had aged in the months since I'd seen him last, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. When I outlined my proposal, return as Chief Technology Officer with expanded authority and equity, he studied me carefully. Why should I come back, Claire? He asked. Ryan tossed me aside like yesterday's newspaper after 15 years of building this company's technology. The board did nothing. The board didn't know, I explained. And now I'm here, asking you to help me rebuild what we both care about. Thomas stirred his coffee slowly. I heard rumors about Archer Valley Capital. That it was you all along. I nodded. I believed in Stratus Grid enough to invest everything I had. Why keep it secret? You could have prevented Ryan from doing any damage. I wanted to understand the business from every angle before stepping into leadership, I replied. Including how vulnerable we were to someone like Ryan. It was a costly lesson, but valuable. 2 weeks later, Thomas was back in Austin, leading our engineering division with renewed purpose. His return triggered a cascade of positive developments. Former team members followed him back. Client confidence improved, and our product roadmap stabilized. Not every relationship could be salvaged, though. Janet Winters, our former marketing director, whom Ryan had replaced with his fraternity brother, declined my offer to return. I appreciate the gesture, Claire, she said during our video call. But I've found something new. Something that's mine. I think that's what you'd want for me, right? She was right. I respected her decision and asked if she'd consider consulting for us during the transition. She agreed, and her insights proved invaluable as we rebuilt our marketing strategy. The hardest conversation was with Heather from HR, the woman who had sat beside Ryan when he fired. Me, who had laughed nervously at his birthday joke. I didn't fire her. That would have made me no better than Ryan. Instead, I invited her to a one-on-one lunch in the company cafe. I want to understand your perspective on what happened, I said as we sat with our salads. No judgment, no consequences, just truth. Heather couldn't meet my eyes at first. I was afraid, she finally admitted. Ryan made it clear early on. You were either with him or against him. I have 2 kids in college. Claire, I couldn't risk my job. Fear is a powerful motivator, I acknowledged. But as we rebuild this company, I need to know, can you help create a culture where people don't make decisions based on fear? That conversation led to a complete overhaul of our HR practices, with Heather leading the charge. We implemented anonymous reporting channels, revised performance review processes, and established clear escalation paths for ethical concerns. Heather found her voice as an advocate for employee well-being, transforming from a reluctant enabler to a cultural change agent. By the end of my first year as CEO, Stratus Grid had not only recovered but began to thrive. Our stock price, which had tumbled during Ryan's tenure, rebounded to pre-crisis levels. Client retention exceeded 95%. Employee satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. The board, initially skeptical of my unconventional path to leadership, became my strongest supporters. At the annual shareholder meeting, Walter Reed publicly acknowledged what he called the Donovan difference. A year ago, we were on the brink of dismantling a great company, he told the assembled investors. Today, we're stronger than ever, thanks to a leader who understood StratusGrid's value when others couldn't see it. Success brought new challenges, of course. Competitors took notice of our resurgence and stepped up their recruitment efforts, targeting our top talent with lucrative offers. Larger tech firms proposed partnerships that seemed beneficial on the surface but would have compromised our independence. I navigated these waters by maintaining absolute transparency with our team and clients. When a major competitor offered to acquire us for a substantial premium, I shared the offer details with all employees along with my rationale for declining. We're not building StratusGrid to sell it, I wrote in a company-wide email. We're building it to lead. That philosophy guided our strategic decisions. Rather than chasing short-term gains, we invested in long-term capabilities, expanding our research division, establishing a machine learning lab, creating a talent development program that became the envy of our industry. My personal life, meanwhile, took a backseat to corporate responsibilities. Weekends disappeared into strategy sessions. Holidays became opportunities to catch up on industry reading. My sparse dating life, already complicated by demanding work hours, became essentially non-existent. Marcia, who had evolved from my attorney to trusted friend, staged what she called an intervention on the second anniversary of my ascension to CEO. You've rebuilt the company, she said over dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant. But what about Claire Donovan? The human being. When's the last time you took a vacation, met someone for a date, pursued any interest outside of StratusGrid? She was right, of course. I had fallen into the same trap that snares many successful executives, defining my worth entirely through professional achievement. The company was thriving, but my personal life had atrophied. That conversation sparked a period of reflection. I began blocking off non-negotiable personal time, one weekend each month where I disconnected completely from work. I resumed yoga classes, joined a book club, reconnected with university friends. Small steps toward reclaiming balance. It was during one of these personal weekends, hiking in the hill country outside Austin, that I had an epiphany about StratusGrid's future. Our core business was solid, but technology was evolving rapidly. Quantum computing, once theoretical, was becoming commercially viable. AI was transforming cloud infrastructure management. If we continued merely executing our current strategy, we'd eventually face the same fate my father had warned about: stop swimming, and you die. The following Monday, I called an executive retreat at a ranch in Fredericksburg. For 3 days, our leadership team disconnected from daily operations to envision StratusGrid's next evolution. We debated, brainstormed, challenged assumptions, and ultimately crafted a 5-year vision that would require bold investments and calculated risks. Thomas, now fully settled into his CTO role, expressed what many felt. This is ambitious, Claire. Wall Street might not understand it immediately. They don't need to understand it immediately, I replied. They need to trust that we're building for the future, not just the next quarter. Implementing this vision meant restructuring parts of the company, the very thing Ryan had attempted, but with vastly different intent and approach. Where he sought to dismantle for quick profit, we sought to evolve for sustained growth. The process wasn't without pain. Some roles became obsolete as we pivoted toward new technologies. Some team members chose not to join the journey. But unlike Ryan's secretive, top-down approach, ours was transparent and collaborative. We provided generous transitions for departing employees, including retraining opportunities and placement assistance. 3 years into my tenure as CEO, StratusGrid had transformed from a mid-tier cloud infrastructure provider to an industry pioneer. In quantum-secured cloud architecture, our patent portfolio tripled, our valuation quadrupled. We were attracting talent from Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, engineers and executives who wanted to be part of something revolutionary. On the personal front, I found unexpected connection through our company's new charitable foundation, which supported STEM education in underserved communities. While judging a high school technology competition we sponsored, I met Daniel Reyes, a physics teacher whose passion for education matched my passion for technology. Our first date was refreshingly disconnected from the corporate world, a symphony performance, followed by late-night coffee. Daniel knew nothing about cloud computing or corporate finance, but everything about making complex ideas accessible and inspiring curiosity. His perspective was exactly what I needed to balance my increasingly technical worldview. As our relationship developed, Daniel became my sounding board and reality check. When I'd get lost in quarterly projections or competitive analyses, he'd remind me of the human impact of our work, how the technologies we built could either enhance or diminish human potential. Companies are tools, he told me once as we walked along Lady Bird Lake. Powerful tools, but tools nonetheless. The question is always, tools for what purpose? That question, tools for what purpose, became central to StratusGrid's evolving mission. We weren't just building better cloud infrastructure, we were creating technological foundations that empowered human creativity and connection. This mission attracted like-minded partners. We formed alliances with educational institutions, healthcare innovators, and sustainability pioneers. Our technologies began powering everything from remote surgical systems to distributed renewable energy networks. By year 4, StratusGrid was no longer just a successful company, it was a movement, drawing people who wanted technology to serve humanity's highest aspirations. Not everyone appreciated this approach, of course. Traditional investors questioned our investments in long-horizon research. Competitors spread rumors about our financial stability. A particularly aggressive hedge fund accumulated a significant minority position in our stock, agitating for shareholder value maximization, code for cost-cutting, and focus on short-term profits. The battle played out in boardrooms and financial media throughout year 5. The hedge fund, Corvus Capital, launched what amounted to a smear campaign, publishing research that questioned our strategic direction and my leadership capabilities. Walter Reed, still our most loyal investor, advised caution. They're trying to provoke you, Claire. Don't give them ammunition. I took his advice, responding to attacks not with defensiveness, but with transparent communication about our long-term vision and the metrics that validated our approach. When Corvus proposed its own slate of board candidates, we engaged directly with shareholders, explaining why continuity of leadership was critical at this juncture. The proxy fight culminated at our annual shareholder meeting. As controlling shareholder, I could have simply outvoted Corvus, but that would have left divisions and resentments. Instead, I invited their lead partner, Maxwell Sterling, to present his perspective directly to all shareholders. Maxwell was everything Ryan had aspired to be: polished, articulate, Harvard Business School pedigree. His presentation was masterful, highlighting short-term performance metrics where we lagged industry benchmarks and projecting massive returns from his proposed optimization strategy. When my turn came, I didn't present slides or financial projections. Instead, I invited to the stage 3 people: a rural doctor using our technology to deliver specialist care to remote communities, a climate scientist whose research was accelerated by our quantum computing platform, and a first-generation college student whose education was supported by our foundation. These are StratusGrid's true metrics, I told the assembled shareholders. Not quarterly fluctuations or industry benchmarks, but human impact. We're building a company that will thrive for decades, not just the next fiscal year. That requires patience, vision, and unwavering commitment to our purpose. The vote wasn't close. Corvus's board candidates were rejected by an overwhelming margin. Maxwell left without a handshake. But the message was clear: StratusGrid would chart its own course, guided by long-term vision rather than short-term pressures. In the aftermath, something unexpected happened. Our stock price, which had fluctuated during the proxy fight, began a steady climb. Analysts who had questioned our strategy started to recognize its value. New investors, aligned with our long-horizon approach, increased their positions. By the 6th anniversary of my becoming CEO, Stratus Grid had grown from a promising mid-tier player to an industry titan. Our market capitalization exceeded $50 billion. Our technologies had become industry standards. Our corporate campus in Austin had expanded to accommodate over 5,000 employees. More personally satisfying was the culture we'd built. In an industry notorious for burnout and high turnover, our retention rates were double the average. Our internal innovation program had generated 73 patents in the past year alone. When industry publications released their Best Places to Work rankings, we consistently placed in the top 5. Daniel and I married in a small ceremony on the 6th anniversary of Ryan firing me, turning painful anniversaries into joyful ones. Daniel called it, "We honeymooned in Portugal," where I managed to go 4 entire days without checking email, a personal record that made Daniel's inordinately proud. Returning to Austin as newlyweds, we bought a historic home in Travis Heights, close enough to walk to Stratus Grid's campus when weather permitted. We converted the 3rd bedroom into a shared office, my side dominated by industry reports and product prototypes, his by-student papers, and physics demonstrations. Our dinner conversations became a fascinating blend of corporate strategy and educational philosophy. Daniel would share stories about inspiring students to love science. I would describe how we were applying scientific innovations to solve business challenges. Different worlds connected by shared values. In year 7, I made a decision that surprised many. I announced my intention to step down as CEO within 18 months. Not to leave Stratus Grid, I would remain as executive chairperson, but to create space for new leadership energy. The greatest test of any leader, I told the board, is how well the organization thrives after their departure. I've built a leadership team capable of taking Stratus Grid to heights I can't even imagine. It's time to let them lead. We implemented a careful succession plan, ultimately selecting Mariah Vasquez, our brilliant Chief Operating Officer, as the next CEO. Maria had joined us 4 years earlier from a competitor, attracted by our mission and culture. She brought operational excellence and strategic insight, complemented by genuine compassion for our team members. My final year as CEO was focused on ensuring Maria's success. We worked side by side, sharing decision-making and gradually transferring relationships with key clients and partners. When the formal transition occurred on my 8th anniversary as CEO, it felt less like an ending than an evolution. At the transition ceremony, Marcus Teller, our original founder, now in his 70s, made a surprise appearance. He embraced me on stage before addressing the company. When I started Stratus Grid in my garage, I dreamed of building something that would outlast me, he said, voice thick with emotion. Claire didn't just preserve that dream, she expanded it beyond anything I could have imagined. My new role as executive chairperson brought different challenges and opportunities. With less focus on day-to-day operations, I could devote energy to industry leadership, public policy, and emerging technologies. I joined the World Economic Forum's Technology Governance Council, advocating for ethical AI deployment. I testified before Congress on cybersecurity standards. I mentored female technology leaders through a program we established with local universities. Stratus Grid continued to thrive under Maria's leadership. She brought her own vision and style, making changes I might not have considered, all while preserving the core values we'd established. The company grew, evolved, and remained at the forefront of technological innovation. 10 years after Ryan laughed while firing me on my 38th birthday, Stratus Grid hosted a gala celebrating a decade of transformation. The Austin Convention Center ballroom was filled with employees, partners, clients, and community leaders. A timeline along one wall chronicled our journey from near disaster to industry leadership. During the evening, I found myself standing before the Year Zero panel, featuring a photo of Ryan Halden at his first all-hands meeting promising to shed our skin. Beside me, Walter Reed chuckled softly. Ever wonder what happened to him? He asked. I shook my head. Not really. But curiosity got the better of me later that night. In our home office, after Daniel had gone to bed, I searched for Ryan Halden online. He had bounced between several companies, never staying more than 18 months. His LinkedIn profile now listed him as a strategic consultant, which usually meant unemployed. His most recent activity was a self-published article titled The Unseen Dangers of Passive Ownership in Tech Companies. I smiled at the irony. Ryan still didn't understand what had happened. It wasn't about ownership structures or corporate governance. It was about building something meaningful versus dismantling for short-term gain. It was about respect versus arrogance. It was about patience versus impulsiveness. As I closed my laptop, I thought about the journey from that humiliating moment in Ryan's office to tonight's celebration. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been mistakes, setbacks, and difficult choices along the way. But the outcome, a thriving company, a positive impact on thousands of lives. A corporate culture based on respect and purpose validated every difficult moment. In the finance world, you don't need to shout to hold power. You don't need to intimidate or manipulate. You just need to understand what truly matters and be willing to build it, protect it, and nurture it, one decision at a time. The next morning, I woke early and walked to our campus while the city was still quiet. The Stratus Grid logo, a stylized cloud rising above a grid, glowed softly in the dawn light. Employees would begin arriving soon, continuing the work we'd built together. I thought about my father and his Sunday morning wisdom. Working for someone else means building their dream, not yours. He wasn't entirely right. When the dream is shared, when it connects to something larger than any individual, ownership becomes stewardship. The company wasn't mine. It belonged to every person who contributed to its purpose. As the sun rose over Austin, I felt profound gratitude for the journey, even for Ryan's arrogant laugh on my birthday 10 years ago. That moment of humiliation had catalyzed a decade of creation. Sometimes the worst moments contain the seeds of the best opportunities. You just need the courage to plant them, the patience to nurture them, and the vision to recognize what they might become. 15 years after that fateful birthday, Stratus Grid had evolved beyond recognition from the vulnerable company Ryan Halden had nearly dismantled. We'd expanded globally, with offices in 23 countries. Our technologies powered critical infrastructure across 6 continents. Our annual innovation conference drew technology leaders from around the world. I had transitioned to a new role as founding chairperson, focusing primarily on our foundation's work in technology education. Daniel had become its executive director after retiring from teaching, bringing his educational expertise to our philanthropic efforts. Together, we developed programs that had provided technology training to over 100 students from underserved communities. Maria Vasquez had completed a successful 7-year tenure as CEO before being appointed to the President's Council on Technology and Innovation. Her successor, Jason Kim, once an entry-level engineer who had risen through our ranks, was now leading Stratus Grid into emerging fields like neural interface computing and biodegradable hardware. The company's culture had remained remarkably consistent despite its growth. We still valued transparency, collaboration, and purpose above all. Our core principles, established during those rebuilding days after Ryan's departure, had become institutional DNA, transmitted through generations of leadership. On the 15th anniversary of my becoming CEO, we dedicated the Claire Donovan Innovation Center, a research facility and technology museum open to the public. During the ceremony, I reflected on the journey from product manager to controlling shareholder to CEO to my current role. Success isn't a destination, I told the assembled crowd. It's a continuous process of creation, adaptation, and renewal. Stratus Grid has thrived not because of any individual, but because of our collective commitment to building something meaningful. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, early 30s. with the focused energy I recognized from my own early career. Ms. Donovan, she began, I'm Sophia Lynn, from Product Development. I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I've been researching company history for our archives project. And I found something interesting about Archer Valley Capital. My heart skipped a beat. Though the full story had emerged years ago, younger employees often didn't know the details. I discovered that you created the fund using your inheritance, she continued. That you invested everything you had in Stratus Grid when others were abandoning it. That you worked as an employee for years while secretly being the majority owner. I nodded, wondering where this was leading. I just wanted to say, it inspired me to start investing in Stratus Grid stock through our employee purchase program. I believe in what we're building enough to commit my financial future to it, not just my career. Her words touched me deeply. The cycle was continuing, belief transforming into commitment, commitment enabling creation, creation inspiring belief in others. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a small dinner at our home for original team members who had weathered the Ryan era and helped rebuild. Thomas Chen, now semi-retired but still serving as a technical advisor. Heather from HR, who had transformed our people operations before moving to a nonprofit focused on workplace ethics. Teresa from UX design, whose birthday gift had provided a moment of brightness on that terrible day. Miguel, the security guard who had escorted me out, now our global security director. As we shared memories over wine and locally sourced cuisine, Teresa mentioned the gift bag she'd left on my desk that fateful morning. I was devastated when you were escorted out, she admitted. I thought Ryan had deliberately chosen your birthday to make it more humiliating. He did, I confirmed. He actually laughed about it. Miguel shook his head. I never told you this, but after walking you out, I went back to document what personal items remained in your office. Standard procedure. Ryan was already there, going through your desk drawers. Looking for what? Thomas asked. I think he was searching for anything that might indicate you had more influence than he realized. Miguel replied. He seemed paranoid about your connections with the board and investors. If only he'd known. Heather laughed softly. Would it have changed anything? Thomas wondered. Men like Ryan don't adapt. They double down. The conversation flowed into the night, weaving between past struggles and current triumphs. These people had stood by me during Stratus Grid's darkest period and had been instrumental in its renaissance. Our bond transcended typical workplace relationships. We had built something meaningful together, something that continued to grow beyond our individual contributions. As our guests departed around midnight, Daniel and I stood on our porch, watching taillights disappear down the tree-lined street. 15 years, he mused. From fired employee to company legend. How does it feel? I considered his question carefully. Less about personal vindication than I would have expected. I finally replied. More about collective accomplishment. That's why you succeeded where Ryan failed, Daniel said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. He saw the company as a vehicle for personal ambition. You saw it as a community with shared purpose? The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Walter Reed. Now in his 80s, Walter had reduced his involvement in business affairs, but remained a treasured advisor. Claire, he wrote, a situation has come to my attention that might interest you. Ironclad Systems, one of your competitors, is imploding under circumstances remarkably similar to what Ryan attempted at Stratus Grid. Their CEO, Maxwell Sterling, has been systematically dismantling core divisions while preparing the company for acquisition. Maxwell Sterling, the same man who had led Corvus Capital's proxy fight against us years earlier. After failing to change Stratus Grid's direction, he had apparently taken a more direct approach at Ironclad, becoming CEO through what financial media called a leadership transition. Walter continued, several key Ironclad executives have reached out to me confidentially. They're looking for guidance on how to preserve what they've built. Your experience might be invaluable. Would you be willing to meet with them? I sat with this request, considering its implications. Ironclad was our competitor, yes, but also part of the broader technology ecosystem. Their innovative database architecture complemented our cloud infrastructure. Their failure would disrupt thousands of clients and employees. After consulting with Jason and our legal team to ensure no conflicts of interest, I agreed to meet with the Ironclad executives. We gathered at Walter's Lake House, neutral territory, on a stormy Saturday afternoon. 5 people sat around Walter's dining table: Ironclad's Chief Technology Officer, Vice President of Product, General Counsel, Chief Financial Officer, and Head of Engineering. Their expressions ranged from skeptical to desperate. "Thank you for coming," began Diane Morgan, their CTO. "I'm still not entirely comfortable sharing company challenges with a competitor. But Walter assured us this conversation will remain confidential." "Completely confidential," I confirmed. "I'm here as someone who navigated a similar situation, not as StratusGrid's representative." For the next 2 hours, they described a scenario eerily reminiscent of Ryan's tenure: experienced leaders sidelined, financial manipulations, strategic relationships damaged, core technologies neglected in favor of marketable innovations that generated press but little value. "Maxwell presents beautifully to the board," explained James Winters, their CFO. "His quarterly decks are masterpieces of misdirection, emphasizing vanity metrics while burying concerning fundamentals." "What's his endgame?" I asked. "Acquisition by Datacore," Diane replied. "They want our patent portfolio and client list, not our people or products. Once the deal closes, most of us will be redundant." I nodded slowly. "And your ownership structure?" "Widely distributed," James said. "No controlling shareholder." Maxwell secured his position through a coalition of hedge funds and private equity firms. They control about 43% collectively. Different circumstances than StratusGrid's, requiring different approaches. I couldn't offer a direct parallel to my own experience, but perhaps something more valuable: a framework for reclaiming their company's direction. "The first thing to understand," I began, "is that companies like yours aren't just assets to be traded. They're living organizations with institutional knowledge, relationships, and potential that can't be quantified on a balance sheet. Your challenge is helping others see that value before it's destroyed." Over the next several hours, we developed a multifaceted strategy, documenting the true state of Ironclad's business, identifying key clients and partners who might advocate for stability, preparing alternative leadership scenarios, establishing confidential communication channels among trusted team members. "This won't be easy," I cautioned as our meeting concluded. "Maxwell has positioned himself well. But remember, his type of leadership is fundamentally extractive. It creates resistance naturally. Your advantage is that you're fighting to build, not to dismantle." As they prepared to leave, Diane lingered behind. "There's something we didn't mention in the group discussion," she said quietly. "Several of us have been purchasing company stock individually, small amounts. Nothing that requires disclosure. We're nowhere near a controlling position, but collectively, we own about 7% now." I smiled, recognizing the parallel to my own journey. "Keep going," I encouraged. "Ownership creates options." The Ironclad situation evolved over the following months. I maintained contact with their leadership team, offering counsel as they navigated increasingly turbulent waters. When Maxwell announced the proposed acquisition by Datacore, they were prepared, mobilizing client testimonials about the value of Ironclad's independent services, documenting Maxwell's systematic dismantling of core capabilities, presenting alternative business scenarios to key investors. The pivotal moment came during Ironclad's annual shareholder meeting. Maxwell presented the acquisition as a strategic alignment of complementary capabilities. Diane and her colleagues countered with their own vision: an independent Ironclad refocused on its technological strengths and client relationships. The vote was close, but the acquisition was rejected. Maxwell resigned the following week. Diane was appointed interim CEO, with a mandate to rebuild what had been damaged and chart a sustainable independent course. When she called to share the news, I felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction that another company had escaped the fate Ryan had planned for StratusGrid, pride in having contributed to their success, and reflection on how far the technology industry had evolved in recognizing the value of sustainable growth over short-term extraction. "We couldn't have done this without your guidance," Diane said. "You gave us both tactical tools and the confidence to use them." "You did the hard part," I replied. "Fighting for something is always more powerful than fighting against something." Our conversation shifted to the future, potential areas of collaboration between our companies, shared challenges in the evolving technology landscape, ways to foster industry cultures that valued creation over extraction. That evening, I shared the ironclad outcome with Daniel over dinner. He listened attentively, then asked a question that caught me off guard. "Does helping them feel like closing a circle that began with Ryan?" I considered this. Perhaps. But it feels less about personal history and more about propagating a different approach to building companies, one that values sustainable growth, collaborative leadership, and positive impact. Daniel smiled. "That's your legacy, Claire. Not just what you built at Stratus Grid, but how you built it and how that approach is spreading." His observation stayed with me as weeks turned to months. I began receiving invitations to advise other technology leaders facing similar challenges, not just defensive situations like ironclads, but proactive opportunities to establish healthy organizational foundations from the start. This unexpected role, part mentor, part strategist, part industry elder, became increasingly central to my professional identity. While still actively involved in Stratus Grid's governance and foundation work, I found myself drawn to these opportunities to shape the broader technology ecosystem. 2 years after the ironclad situation, I formalized this role by establishing the Donovan Institute for Sustainable Technology Leadership, a think tank and advisory organization dedicated to fostering business practices that balanced innovation with responsibility, growth with stability, profit with purpose. The Institute's inaugural conference brought together technology leaders, investors, policymakers, and academics to explore what sustainable leadership meant in an industry defined by disruption. My opening keynote drew explicit connections between leadership philosophy and business outcomes. The myth of the ruthless visionary disruptor has dominated our industry narrative for too long. I told the assembled leaders, "We celebrate executives who extract value through financial engineering rather than those who create value through genuine innovation and responsible stewardship." The conference sparked conversations that extended far beyond the event itself. Media coverage highlighted the growing movement toward what some called regenerative leadership, approaches that built organizational capacity rather than depleting it for short-term gains. As the Institute's influence grew, I received an unexpected message from a journalist researching a profile on fallen tech stars. She was writing about Ryan Halden and requested an interview about my experiences working with him. My initial impulse was to decline. I had moved beyond that chapter and saw little value in revisiting it publicly. But after reflection, I recognized an opportunity to transform that personal history into a teachable moment without seeking revenge or validation. The interview took place at the Institute's headquarters, a converted warehouse in East Austin, filled with natural light and collaborative spaces. The journalist, Renee Taylor, began with standard questions about my career trajectory before turning to Ryan. "You rarely speak about Ryan Halden or how he fired you," she noted. "Yet that moment seems pivotal in your journey. Why the reluctance?" "It's not reluctance," I clarified. "It's perspective. What Ryan did, firing me on my birthday, laughing about it, was momentarily painful, but ultimately insignificant compared to what came after. Dwelling on it would give it more importance than it deserves. He tells a different story," Renee said. "In recent interviews, he claims you orchestrated his downfall through backroom maneuvering and secretive shares accumulation." I couldn't help but smile. That characterization reveals more about his perspective than mine. I purchased Stratus Grid shares openly through legal channels because I believed in the company's potential. I presented factual evidence of his mismanagement to investors because I cared about the company's Future. There was nothing secretive about defending what we had built. Do you consider what happened to him fair? She pressed. Fair isn't the relevant metric, I replied. Appropriate is better. Ryan's approach was dismantling a healthy company for short-term gain. The consequences he experienced, removal from leadership, were appropriate given his actions. Had he succeeded, thousands of employees would have lost livelihoods. Clients would have lost trusted services. And innovations benefiting millions would never have materialized. The resulting article. Beyond Revenge, How Claire Donovan Transformed Corporate Humiliation into Industry Revolution. Framed my experience not as personal vindication, but as a catalyst for systemic change. It positioned the Donovan Institute as an outgrowth of lessons learned during Stratus Grid's transformation. The article's publication coincided with the 20th anniversary of my joining Stratus Grid as a product manager, 20 years from uncertain newcomer to industry influencer. 20 years of building, learning, adapting, and growing. To mark this milestone, Daniel organized a surprise gathering at our home. Not industry leaders or corporate partners, but the people who had shared the journey most intimately. Thomas and his wife, Marcia and her partner, Teresa and her family, Heather and her husband, Miguel and his children. Walter, now using a cane but sharp as ever. As twilight settled over our backyard, Walter raised a toast. To Claire, who taught us all that true power comes not from control, but from creation. Who showed us that companies can be more than profit machines. They can be vehicles for human potential. I looked around at these faces, colleagues turned friends turned family, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path from that humiliating moment in Ryan's office to this evening of celebration had been neither straight nor easy. There had been mistakes, setbacks, and difficult choices. But the outcome, lives enriched, innovations advanced. A more humane approach to business leadership validated every challenging moment. In the world of technology and finance, conventional wisdom suggests that power comes from aggression, from domination, from being the loudest voice in the room. My experience had taught a different lesson. True power comes from building something people value, enough to commit themselves to, from creating conditions where others can thrive, from patience, persistence, and unwavering purpose. Ryan had laughed when he fired me on my birthday all those years ago, believing he had demonstrated his power and diminished mine. He never understood that real power isn't exercised in moments of cruelty or domination. It's cultivated through consistent creation of value, for customers, for employees, for communities, for the world. As stars emerged in the Texas sky and conversations flowed around me, I reflected on my father's wisdom about ownership and dreams. He had been right about the importance of owning your path, but perhaps incomplete in his understanding of whose dream was being built. The most meaningful endeavors are never just about individual dreams. They're about shared visions that connect us to something larger than ourselves, the desire to create, to contribute, to leave the world better than we found it. 20 years after joining Stratus Grid, 15 years after being fired on my birthday, I had found my greatest satisfaction not in proving Ryan wrong or in personal achievement, but in building communities of purpose at Stratus Grid, through the foundation, at the Institute, and beyond. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Daniel and I stood in our kitchen, loading the dishwasher together. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "Something my father used to say," I replied. "Working for someone else means building their dream, not yours." Daniel raised an eyebrow. And I think he was only partly right. When the work connects to something meaningful, something that matters beyond yourself, the question of whose dream it is becomes less important than what the dream is about. Daniel smiled, passing me a glass to rinse. "And what is your dream about, Claire Donovan?" I considered the question carefully. Creating spaces where people can do their best work. Building systems that enhance human capability rather than extracting from it. Demonstrating that business can be both profitable and profoundly humane. "That's a pretty good dream," he said, closing the dishwasher. Not just mine anymore, I replied. It belongs to everyone who's helped build it. Later that night, as Daniel slept beside me, I found myself unable to rest. Energized by the evening's conversations and reflections, I slipped out of bed and padded to our home office, where moonlight streamed through the windows. On my desk sat a small, worn object, the handmade birthday card Teresa had given me on that pivotal day when Ryan fired me. I had kept it all these years. A reminder of the unexpected kindness that can emerge in difficult moments. Beside it was the most recent annual report from the Stratus Grid Foundation, documenting the educational opportunities provided to 12,000 students in the past year alone. And next to that, the latest research publication from the Donovan Institute, outlining frameworks for technology governance that balanced innovation with responsibility. From a single cruel moment had grown a network of positive impact, extending far beyond anything I could have imagined while standing in Ryan's office, holding my termination papers on my 38th birthday. I opened my laptop and began writing, not strategy documents or business plans, but reflections on the journey and lessons learned along the way. Not for publication or presentation, but for clarity and continuation. To distill 2 decades of experience into insights that might guide the next chapter, whatever it might be. As dawn broke over Austin, I was still writing. The technological landscape would continue evolving. Business models would transform. Leadership challenges would take new forms. But certain principles would remain constant: the value of building rather than extracting, the power of shared purpose, the importance of patience in pursuit of meaningful goals. Ryan Halden had laughed when he fired me on my birthday, believing he had demonstrated his power and diminished mine. What he never understood, what so many leaders fail to grasp, is that true power isn't exercised in moments of cruelty or domination. It's cultivated through consistent creation of value. It's expressed through enabling others to achieve their potential. It's measured not by what you control, but by what you create. In the soft morning light, I closed my laptop and made a decision. The next chapter would focus not on expansion, but on depth. Fewer initiatives pursued with greater intensity, fewer relationships cultivated with deeper connection, fewer goals pursued with fuller commitment. When Daniel woke, I shared this intention over coffee on our porch, watching the neighborhood come alive with morning activities. Less breadth, more depth, he summarized. I like it. Especially the fewer relationships, deeper connection part. He squeezed my hand. Starting with this one? I smiled, squeezing back. Especially this one. The day unfolded with a sense of renewed clarity. Emails were answered with intention rather than obligation. A board meeting was approached as an opportunity for meaningful discussion rather than procedural. Requirement? A mentoring session with young entrepreneurs became a genuinely connective exchange rather than a perfunctory knowledge transfer. As evening approached, I received an unexpected message from Sophia Lin, the young product manager who had approached me at the Innovation Center dedication. She had been promoted to lead a new division focused on accessible technology for users with disabilities. Your story about investing everything in what you believed in has stayed with me, she wrote. I'm investing everything in this initiative, not just financially, but creatively and emotionally. If it fails, I fail. But if it succeeds, we'll open digital worlds to millions currently excluded. Thank you for showing me what committed leadership looks like. Her message captured exactly what I hoped would outlast any personal accomplishments, not specific strategies or business models, but an approach to leadership based on genuine conviction, patient building, and human connection. That night, as stars emerged over Austin, I stood on our porch with Daniel, reflecting on the journey from humiliation to creation, from individual ambition to collective purpose. The path had been neither straight nor easy. There had been mistakes, setbacks, and difficult choices. But the outcome, lives enriched, innovations advanced. A more humane approach to business leadership, validated every challenging moment. In the finance world, you don't need to shout to hold power. You don't need to humiliate or intimidate. You just need to understand what truly matters: and be willing to invest yourself completely in building it. Ryan had laughed when he fired me on my birthday all those years ago. But true leadership isn't about who laughs first. It's about who builds something worth lasting.